Okay, today we're going to talk about cylinders and circles. And by the end of this lesson, you should be able to say, I can find the area of a circle, and I can find the volume of a cylinder. Let's start with talking about what is a circle. If I asked you to shade the circle, you might do this. But that would not be entirely correct, because a circle is a set of all points equal distance from a center point. So if this is my center point of my circle, this point here in the circle and this point here on the circle are not the same distance from my center point. So if you wanted to shade the circle, you would need to shade or darken the outline of the circle. And we're going to talk about what the outline of the circle is. Let's start by thinking about this. Suppose this is our starting point. Now let's consider a point that is 5 inches away from our starting point. Now let's consider another point that is 5 inches away from our starting point. And another, and another, and we could keep going until we're starting to see a circle here. Pretty soon this collection of points makes a circle. This circle has a radius of 5 inches because each point on the circle is 5 inches away from our starting point. And you can think of the radius as a bicycle spoke. It goes around and around the circle, but it does not change size. If the length of the radius is doubled, then you have a diameter. So, the formula for the diameter of a circle is the radius times 2, or diameter equals 2r. Write this down in your summary. The diameter cuts a circle into 2 halves, 2 equal halves. The perimeter of a circle has a special name as well. It's called the circumference. And every circle has a certain property to it. So it takes 3.14, about 3.14, and if that number looks familiar to you, remember 3.14 is an estimation of pi. So it takes 3.14 diameters to make the circumference of any circle. Let's take a closer look. Here is 1, 2, 3, and 14/100ths of the diameter. So this is the length of the diameter, this is the length of the diameter, this is the length of the diameter, this is 14/100ths about of the diameter. And let's wrap the circle with these 4 pieces we have. And presto! We've taken 3.14 of our diameter and made the circumference. So let's look at an example with numbers. Here's a circle with a diameter of 10 centimeters. That means you can take 3 diameters of 10 centimeters plus a little extra and wrap it around the circle. Or 3.14 times the diameter, which is 10, to get 31 4/10 centimeters as our circumference. Or we could use this formula. The circumference is the diameter times pi. And remember that we're going to use pi, instead of using pi, because that's an irrational number that goes on forever and ever, we're going to use 3.14 as pi. Take a minute and write this down in your summary. Let's review what we know about a circle so far. A circle is a collection of points that are all the same distance away from a starting point. The radius is the distance from the center of the circle to any point on the circle. The diameter is twice the length of the radius, and the diameter cuts the circle into 2 equal halves. The circumference is the perimeter, or the length around the outside of the circle. Pi is going to be estimated as 3.14 for our purposes. And this is the number of diameters it takes to make this is the number of diameters that it takes to make up the circumference. So you can calculate the circumference by multiplying the length of the diameter by 3.14. Or the circumference equals diameter times 3.14. Let's practice. In your notebooks, go ahead and find the circumference of these circles. Pause the video now, but don't forget to restart because we're not done. Let's find the area of a circle. You can do this along with me or just follow along as I do this on the screen. Draw a circle. Divide the circle into 10 equal slices and cut out your circle and your 10 slices. Remember, the outside or the perimeter of the circle is the circumference. This is going to be very important in a minute. Arrange your slices in a row, one up, one down. And let's look at what parts of the circle we have here. What shape does this resemble? You might be thinking this resembles a parallelogram. Since it resembles a parallelogram, let's look at the formula for a parallelogram and see if that can help us find the formula for the area of a circle. What is the formula for the area of a parallelogram? Base times height. And remember, height is how tall it is, from the lowest point to the highest point, not necessarily one of the sides. It's how tall it stands. So what's the base of this shape? Well, it's rounded, so I know it might be the outside of my circle. How much of the outside of my circle, though? Let's look. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of my rounded pieces on the bottom, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of my rounded pieces on the top. So really, it's like my circumference, but only half of the circumference. So let's replace base with half of the circumference. Now let's look and ask ourselves, what is the height of this shape? Well, the height is the distance from a point on my circumference to the center point, since all of our pieces were cut from the center of my circle. So really the height is the radius. What's the formula for circumference? It's diameter times pi, right? So really we can replace circumference with diameter times pi. So we're taking half of the diameter, which is what? What is half of the diameter? You might recall that half of the diameter is the radius. So I'm going to replace half of the diameter with radius. And the radius times pi times the radius will give us the formula for the area of a circle. Or simplified, using the commutative property to rearrange the formula, I can think of it as radius times 3.14, or radius squared times 3.14. So the area of a circle is 3.14, or pi, times radius squared. Take a minute and write this in your summary. Now let's practice. You're going to find the areas of these circles. I'm going to do the first one with you. Remember, the formula for the area of a circle is 3.14, or pi, times radius squared. So if I'm going to do this first one, I'm going to substitute what I know. I know my radius is 3. So I'm going to take order of operations, do 3 squared, which is 9, and multiply that by pi, or 3.14. And when I do that, I get 28 and 26/100 inches squared, because area is always measured in inches squared. So I know this is 28 and 26/100 inches squared. Go ahead and do the next two in your notes. Keep in mind, though, for the second one here, you are given the diameter. So what do you need to do with the diameter before you can plug it into this formula? You need to find the radius. So find the radius of this circle, then use the area formula. Pause the video now and do these problems, but don't stop. But when you're done, continue to press play again because we have one more thing to talk about. Finding the volume of cylinders. Let's recall how to find the volume of a cube or rectangular prism. If I was using my cubic inches, to build a cube that was 3 by 3 by 3, I started off with a 3 by 3 base. And then I recreated that base 3 times because my height is 3. That told me how many times to recreate that base. And I had a cube that was 3 by 3 by 3 inches. And to find the area of that, I used one of two formulas, length times width times height, or 3 times 3 times 3, to get 27 inches cubed, or the area of the base times the height. And this formula is going to be really important as we look at cylinders. But let's look at it. The area of the base, the length times the width, was 9 times my height, which is 3. I still got 27 inches cubed. Let's see how that looks on a cylinder. Let's consider a cylinder first. The bases are made up of 2 circles, and the height is really just this big long rectangle that's been curved around the circles. If I look at a cylinder with measurements, I'm still going to use the area of the base and multiply that by the height, just like with a rectangular prism. In this case, the area of the base, remember, I'm going to need to use pi times radius squared. The area of the base is going to be 3.14 times 2 squared. Now I'm going to substitute in my height, which is 6. And using the order of operations, I do exponents first, and then I would take 3.14 times 4 and get 12 and 56 hundredths. And then multiply that base times my height, which is 6, to get 75 and 36 hundredths inches cubed. In your notes, go ahead and jot down this formula for the area of a cylinder. It's the area of the base, or that circular base, times the height. Let's look at one more example. I would take my formula, area equals the area of the base times the height. And remember, the base is a circle. So that would be pi times radius squared times my height, which in this case is 8. And using the order of operations, I would need to do exponents first. So 3.14 times 3.14 times 9 is 28 and 26 hundredths. I'm going to multiply that by 8, and I get 226 and 8 hundredths inches cubed as the volume of my cylinder. Let's do some practice. On your own, find the volume of these 2 cylinders. Don't forget to WSQ in your notes, and don't forget the Q part to ask a question. You can go back and watch any part of this video as many times as you need to.